If I had a time machine, I would go back in time and do exactly two things. Sell my sister's Beanie Babies before the bubble burst and buy a bunch of cars while they were still cheap. And this is where you used to be able to find cheap old cars. Today we're gonna look at a bunch of cars that you and I should have both bought when they were still cheap to see how much money we could have made today. Welcome to Donut. First up is a 1987 Mazda RX-7 Turbo that I found in an auto trader from the year 2000. $2,900. The FCRX-7 was the second generation of Mazda's flagship sports coupe and was offered with a 1.3-liter rotary engine called the 13B. The turbo is really the one you want, which gave this thing 180 horsepower, which isn't bad for 1987, and honestly is not that bad for us enthusiasts today. I think this car aged really well. I love flat edges and wedge-shaped cars, but in 2000, the FDRX-7 was still in production at the time, and it overshadowed its older brother, the FC. In 2000, it was just a 13-year-old Mazda that not a lot of people wanted. That's why these were so cheap at the time. Today, FCs can go for well over $20,000 in the right condition, but adjusted for inflation, this car would have only been $5,000 in today's money. That's still a freaking good deal for a turbo. I don't know what I was thinking not buying one of these in 2000, probably because I was in the 4th grade. 1985 Buick Grand National. Sunroof, gauges, alloy wheels, power windows, power brakes, 56,000 miles on a rebuilt motor. Ooh, okay. Brand new tires, runs great. $8,400 or best offer. Okay, that's a deal. The Grand National was one of the wildest American cars to come from China's favorite American car company, Buick. It was built to commemorate Buick's success in NASCAR in the early 80s, where they dominated with the Regal. The Grand National was a blacked out Regal that looked like Darth Vader's personal sports coupe, and it had one engine option, a turbocharged V6. You heard that right, V6, American V6. That motor was good for 200 horsepower when it was first introduced, but by 1987, Buick had bumped that power up to 250, which made it faster than the Corvette at the time. Kind of like the RX-7, these weren't as popular and weren't as desirable as they are right now. Adjusted for inflation, the price works out to about $15,000 today. This one's $8,500. Today, in good condition, a Grand National can fetch around $50,000 easily. This next car wasn't really worth much until just a few years ago. It's a 1993 Ford Bronco from a 2009 issue of Wheel Deals. Here we go. 4x4, very clean. Let's go hunting for only $2,999. Holy crap. The 5th generation Ford Bronco, also known as the OJ Bronco, was the last version before Ford officially canceled the Bronco and then brought it back eventually. The reality is, Ford canceled the Bronco for a good reason. People weren't buying them. Sales were dropping as Americans started to prefer 4-door SUVs, a trend that was booming, especially in 2009, when this ad was listed. Something interesting about these is that Ford heavily discouraged taking the top off because of changing safety regulations at the time. Driving with the roof off would have been technically illegal, so Ford went as far as to change the screws that held it in place to security Torx bolts, and they removed all the instructions on going topless from the owner's manual. Taking it off is possible, but it's a huge pain in the butt, unlike the earlier Broncos, which were a lot more desirable than this one anyway. When Ford brought the Bronco back a few years ago, interest for these 5th gens shot up to the sky. You can pay over $40,000 for one of these today in good condition, but adjusted for inflation, this one would have only cost about $4,000. If you think that was bad, this next one really is gonna hurt. A 1988 BMW M3. Whoa! Very clean. Red and black leather, no cuts, cracks, or dents, pretty nice. New brakes and tires, power everything, runs good. 122,000 miles, that's actually kind of high. $7,500? The E30 M3 is a grail car. BMW created it as a homologation car for FIA Group A racing, which mandated 5,000 street-ready examples. It has a high-revving 200 horsepower dual overhead cam, naturally aspirated 4-cylinder engine that was adapted from the earlier M1 supercars power plant. It also won touring car championships like nobody's business. business. But it was successful beyond the track as well, helping turn the M badge from a niche interest into one of the most famous and storied names in motorsport. By 1998, when this ad was listed, the newer E36 was on the market, and the E30 was a 10-year-old used car. So $7,500 works out to about $14,000 in today's money. And yeah, a 10-year-old M3 does sell for less than $20,000 today, so it's basically a similar deal. But now, thanks to nostalgia for 80s cars and the prestige of the M3 badge, the E30 M3s have blown up in value. Here's one in similar shape to what's on this ad that sold for $65,000, and that's nothing compared to a super low mileage one. Speaking of grail cars, a Mark IV Super Turbo with a 6-speed manual. Also a 15th anniversary edition. Right? Really expensive, huh? We found this one on Supra forums, listed for sale in 2006. Let's see how much it costs. Okay, $25,000. All right, I mean, that's a lot of money still. Maybe they kind of knew what they had, maybe. A 320 horsepower twin turbo inline 6 2JZ. It puts down numbers in the quarter mile that could rival Ferraris and Lamborghinis of the same time period. If you haven't seen our video where James and Nolan drove every generation of Supra, spoiler alert, the Mark IV is the best one. And this is the best spec. The Fast and Furious had been out for a few years at this point, and people knew this car was a big deal in 2006, but just because it was admired doesn't mean it was always valuable. In 2006, the Supra in this forum post would have been 9 years old with 127,000 miles on the odometer, and it still held over half its value from MSRP, which is really solid for this era of car. But adjusted for inflation, it was still only about $38,000 in 2023 money, which is more than some of the other cars on this list so far, but it is still a steal when you consider that this car would easily be in the 6-figure range today. Clean 15th anniversary Supras with the same twin turbo 6-speed setup would easily sell for over $100,000 today, like this one that sold for $126,000 on Bring a Trailer. Here's another gem found in the same photo buys we used earlier, a 1973 and a half Porsche 911T. And it's a half because they did a mid-year facelift. Way to go, Porsche. Let's see what we got. Oh, look at that. 73 and a half, it's actually printed here. Porsche 911T Coupe runs great, clean, black on black, okay. Oh, $4,950. And it's in California. Bruh. What a deal! The 911T is actually the budget trim level of the early 911s. It dropped a lot of the standard features from the nicer 911s like the 911E and the 911S, but they chose to keep the same boxer engine that made 140 horsepower and put down a 0 to 60 time that was only a couple seconds slower than the more expensive models. It was also frequently used in racing and even won the Monte Carlo Rally in 1968. So essentially, you buy the cheap one to go do the fun stuff. The 1973 and a half 911T is actually considered to be the best one to get because for the last 6 months of production, Porsche actually dropped the carburetors and put in a fuel injection system. It still kept the classic look of the early air-cooled 911s, but you didn't have to deal with the big chunky bumpers from the later years. You got the performance without the crappy safety looks. Porsches used to depreciate just like any other luxury car, and a 911T was not really the one you wanted to get for a very long time, especially when the 911S and the 911E were only a few grand more. Air-cooled Porsches in general just weren't worth much in 1998, and this 911T would have cost around $9,283.25 today. That's a crazy deal. That's insane. Here's a 911T for sale for $96,500. And that one will probably go quick because most of these nice ones are 6 figures or more. And this car would not have been a bad way to make 90 grand. This next listing, though, is one of the most insane things we've found in this entire pile of magazines. It's an advertisement in a DuPont registry from February of 2000 for Motorex. And if you know anything about Motorex, then you know exactly where this story is going. But if you don't know anything about Motorex, buckle up. Look at this! February 2000. Look at all the Vipers. We drove those. One of the world's most capable road-going cars. And they ain't lying. They lied about a lot of other stuff, as we're about to find out. Nissan Skylines were never sold in the United States. But Motorex was a car importer that did all of the hard work Nissan wasn't willing to do to make the Skyline US legal, including emissions testing and crash testing. This was great for Japanese car enthusiasts who wanted to get their hands on one of the greatest JDM grail cars to exist, until it was too good to be true. Motorex only imported 16 R34s before they were busted for fraud, which has become one of the most legendary stories in Japanese car lore from the 2000s. Those 16 R34 Skylines are the only R34s in America that are exempt from show and display rules. As you can see, this MotorX ad says an R34 GTR V-Spec, which is the top trim level for one of these cars, would have cost only $89,500. That works out to be about $158,000 in today's money, which is a lot, but not when you consider what people are paying for these cars now when they're lucky enough to find one for sale. Here's a show and display V-Spec 2 that sold for $320,000. And here's a MotorX car owned by Paul Walker himself that sold for $577,500. There's one more car that I definitely should have bought. A McLaren F1. Silver, delivered in May 1995. Alcantara gray on the inside in 3 different shades. 0 to 60 in 3.2 seconds, which is like traffic car numbers now. 0 to 100 in 6.3 seconds, a little bit different. BMW V12, 627 horsepower. Usable as an everyday vehicle, as we know from Mr. Bean himself. Where's the price? $799,000. What a deal! It's hard to explain how massive of an achievement the McLaren F1 was in the year 2000. Its top speed of 240 miles an hour still stands today for the record of the fastest naturally aspirated production car in the entire world. It would take a decade after its introduction for that top speed record to be beat by a production car at all. It used a carbon fiber monocoque chassis to cut weight down to 2,579 pounds, which is wild considering it had over 600 horsepower. Its 0 to 200 mile an hour time was under 30 seconds, and the driver's seat is in the middle of the car. I know we're used to 1,000+ horsepower family sedans nowadays, but in 2000, the only way to be faster than the McLaren F1 was to buy a damn airplane. To buy this car out of a DuPont registry in the year 2000, you'd need the equivalent of 1.4 million bucks in today's money. But guess what? McLaren F1 prices went wild. McLaren only made 106 of these bad boys, and they don't come up for sale that often. So when they do, most McLaren F1s sell at auction for at least $10 million, and some sell for over $20 million. So if I would have just sold my sister's damn Beanie Baby collection in time, and I would have been able to buy this car, and it would have made me $15 million. The real question is, which car today is going to make a ton of money in the next few years? I don't know, maybe the GR Corolla. We'll see. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Thank you so much for watching. Y'all, have a good one.